To learn more about earning college credits with study hall courses, go to gostudyhall.com or click the link in the description. Silver has many uses. You've got fancy jewelry, grandma's table set, the esteemed second place medal, and of course, the ever important werewolf stopping bullets. But long before Bitcoin was a thing, it was silver that became the new hot form of currency. It all started in China, though the silver trade would have far-reaching global impacts. By the middle of the 15th century, the Chinese economy was so flooded with paper money that it had become virtually worthless. It was pretty clear at this point that the Chinese government needed a new form of imperial currency. Gold was too valuable and would have made everyday purchases quite a hassle. And copper? Well, it was too easy to melt down and combine with other, less pricey metals. Enter silver. It was less valuable than gold, which meant the government could make smaller coin denominations that were more useful for daily life, and it was easier to check for purity than copper. There was just one problem. China didn't have any silver mines. Always with the cart before the horse, am I right? As China found ways to bring more silver into the economy, it also expanded global trade networks, creating new economic alliances and rivalries that crossed oceans and continents, linking economies in ways they never had been before. But we can't credit China alone for the rise of the silver trade. Like everything in history, the first global economy was forged by a series of interconnected policies and empires, creating a worldwide network of trade that began with silver, but would go on to catalyze economic and cultural changes and reshape societies forever. I'm Rob Fuller, and this is Study Hall, Modern World History. In our episode on the beginning of the silver trade, we learned that a lot of this started when China introduced the single whip tax reform, which required Chinese citizens to pay their taxes in, you guessed it, silver. And that meant that everybody, from the highest ranking nobles to the rural rice farmers, needed access to silver so they could pay up. And this was a lot of people, considering that China contained a quarter of the world's population in the 16th century. China also started collecting other forms of payment in silver as well through the tributary system, a set of rules China used to control diplomacy and trade. Under this system, other countries paid tribute to China through the exchange of gifts and by dispatching diplomatic missions to the Chinese court. So when the Chinese emperor declared that he would no longer be accepting gold, copper, or paper money as tributes, a whole lot of people outside of China now needed silver too. So silver wasn't just the emperor's new groove, it was everyone's. That's right, silver. The silver for the emperor. The silver chosen specifically to pay the emperor. The emperor's silver? That's silver? Almost overnight, China's switch to the silver standard made silver much more valuable. This worked out really nicely for the Spanish, who, at the time, already controlled silver mines in places like Mexico, Bolivia, and Peru. To move their silver around the globe, the Spanish used large trading ships known as Manila galleons to sail a route across the Pacific. Galleons were huge sailing ships that transported silver, gold, and other treasures. These ships would sail from Mexico to Spain's colony of Manila, weighed down with precious metals extracted by forced labor, like really big 16th century getaway cars? Is that a siren? Manila created a place where the Spanish could trade silver for luxury goods like silk, porcelain, and tea from China, and that pushed more silver into the Chinese economy. See how global we've already gotten? Between the 16th and 19th centuries, it's estimated that the Spanish colonies of Mexico and Peru produced about 85% of the world's silver, and approximately 40% of that ended up in China, where it would cycle right into the government's coffers through the new tax system. China relied heavily on the Spanish to supply the silver that fueled their new economy, and the Spanish equally relied on China's growing need for silver to expand the wealth and prosperity of their colonial empire. This you scratch my back and I'll scratch yours kind of relationship kept trade going between people in Spain, the Americas, and China. But the silver boom did more than establish trade routes for new goods. It helped to set up the very first transoceanic economy between Europe, Asia, and the Americas. But it wasn't just Spanish silver that flowed into China. In the 16th century, Japan became the producer of around 30% of the world's silver. And like the Spanish, the Japanese ruling class knew that silver was their golden opportunity to increase luxury imports from China, as well as earn more profit to invest back into the Tokugawa shogunate's armies. But diplomatic relations between China and Japan were rocky thanks to our old friend, the tributary system. See, back in 1401, the Japanese ruler Ashikaga Yoshimitsu joined China's tributary system. But the Japanese rulers that came after Yoshimitsu didn't like bending at the knee to the authority of another emperor, so instead, they bent the rules and did so pretty frequently. Tensions increased between China and Japan throughout the 16th century until their trade relationship crumbled entirely. So for a long time, these two empires were on the outs, but Japan couldn't bear to miss out on China's lust for silver entirely, so they decided to return to their rule-bending ways, this time by using European merchants as middlemen. So basically, the Japanese would sell silver to the Portuguese, English, or Dutch, and then they would sell the silver to China at a much higher rate, thanks to the sky-high value of silver there in China. That meant Japan could keep growing its silver trade, China could keep buying the silver it needed, and European traders could keep increasing their profits. By the early 17th century, the Americas and Japan had emerged as the leading exporters of silver. And while China was definitely their number one buyer, they weren't the only ones looking to snag some of that shiny stuff. Mughal India was also beginning to buy up lots of silver. In the second half of the 16th century, trade expanded throughout the Indian Ocean as the Portuguese and Dutch fought to take control of the oceanic trade networks from Muslim merchants. This let the Mughal Empire export more commodities like cotton to European states. Mughal textiles became popular in Europe, and Mughal fashion was all the rage for Europeans in the 1500s. And the Mughals were happy to keep trendsetters all over the world dressed in the hottest 16th century fashions, in exchange for silver, of course. Although India had its own stores of silver, they mostly used trade as an opportunity to stock up, melting down the imports and turning it into their own form of currency. Mughal rulers then took that silver money and used it to boost coastal and international trade, which in turn just made silver more valuable globally. And much like it did in other parts of the world, that economic growth helped shape the Mughal Empire. For example, the expansion of textile production impacted how imperial land was used and where Indian citizens lived. The growth of factories brought Indian citizens to cities, which caused urban centers to grow and develop. And that meant that the Mughal Empire had even more manufactured goods they could export. By the end of the 17th century, India was fully integrated into the global trade economy and ranked right up there with the Chinese as a crucial customer in the global network of exchange, swapping textiles and other goods for precious silver. As more and more players joined the supply chain, it became clear that this expansion of the silver economy, and therefore global trade, went way beyond just Europe and China. Each new link in the chain of exports and imports strengthened this powerful economic network. But if you've ever accidentally unplugged your router, you know just how fragile networks can be. Over time, the silver trade began to collapse, and the empires that depended on it suffered the consequences. War, natural disasters, civil unrest, and disease epidemics during the early 17th century weakened the Ming dynasty. Crop failures left people poor and hungry, and by the 1640s, 80% of the counties weren't paying any taxes at all. The Ming government was in a bind. They were already warring with the Manchurian tribes to the northeast, which had been steadily gaining power, and even though times were tough across the empire, the government kept raising taxes on the citizens to fund their military. And it turns out, that made citizens pretty unhappy, and they started to rebel. Those rebellions left the door wide open for the Manchurians, who took over the capital and established the last imperial dynasty of the Chinese Empire, the Qing dynasty. The Qing dynasty placed bans on foreign trade to try to control Ming sympathizers. These bans restricted the flow of goods into China, including silver. This in turn contributed to an economic downturn in Spain, which made the effects of famine, disease, and poor financial policies much worse. China eventually lifted the ban on trade in 1684, but by that point the damage was done. But even though silver was decreasing in value, the global trade networks it created remained strong. Many empires sent new commodities into the global market along these trade routes to take silver's place. Traders shipped high-yield crops from the Americas to China, like sweet potatoes, peanuts, and corn, which made for a pretty tasty, if a bit, well, fraught and exploitative transformation of global trade. These new commodities also led to some major changes in ecological, environmental, and political conditions. Take China. Their population grew from about 40 million people in 1684 to 200 million in 1762. But farmland only increased by less than 26% during the same period. So China began cultivating these high-yield crops from the Americas like corn and sweet potatoes, which could grow in land where traditional crops like rice couldn't. The popularity of sweet potatoes led to mass migrations too, as farmers moved to new areas where they could grow these new crops. And with more nutritious food sources widely available, China's population grew to more than 400 million during the Qing dynasty. Sadly, sweet potato fries wouldn't be invented for another 200 years at least. But new crops and a growing population came with consequences. The overcultivation of these crops destroyed China's ecological balance, leading to deforestation, soil erosion, and frequent floods, which, shockingly, aren't good for farming or the environment as a whole. But putting food on the table now was more important than the ecological impact crops would have later. So Chinese farmers continued to grow the resilient American crops brought over by the silver trade. So even after its decline, silver had a lasting impact on the economic, political, and social well-being of the empires that once relied on it. In the end, the rise of silver created a network of global relationships that made trade from the Americas to Europe to Asia more important than ever before. And while Spain and China often get the credit for fueling the silver trade, they were just two links in a chain of supply and demand that would have broken down if not for the participation of other major producers and buyers of silver, from Japan and Mughal India all the way to Mexico and Peru. With the establishment of strong connections through the silver trade, this network of empires could exchange new goods like crops that impacted their ecology, politics, and cultural identity as well. This also set the stage for new competition in the realm of global commerce, and the introduction of powerful private companies who had a major stake in world trade. If you're enjoying Study Hall Modern World History and are interested in taking an online course and earning college credit, go to gostudyhall.com or click on this button to learn more. Thanks for watching. We'll see you next time.